Hello, I'm Jean Zaminsky. I'm a systemic and family psychotherapist, trainer and supervisor.
Hi, and I'm Catherine Roger, and I'm a child and family systemic psychotherapist and a supervisor.
We're here today to talk about what is supervision, and particularly supervision for family lawyers, and looking at how supervision can help the well-being of family lawyers and therefore help you all to provide the best possible work and the best possible outcome for your clients and the families you work with. So we'll also be thinking about the value added of supervision and going on to give some examples of the kinds of issues that we might talk about in supervision.
So we're starting with what is supervision. We regard supervision as a confidential, safe place to talk about issues, to reflect on the impact of your work and your work relationships on your professional practice, and to think about the interplay of professional and the personal in a consultation setting. This is done in a contracted way, and to stress again, it is confidential. We would hope that anybody coming for supervision would feel deeply listened to. And then Jean, one of the things we wanted to talk about was to reflect a little bit about what supervision isn't.
Yes. I think first of all, supervision isn't a therapy or a counselling space because it's thinking about yourself possibly, but only in as far as it affects your work. It's about your professional development, whereas counselling and therapy is looking at personal development in and of itself.
Again, similarly, it isn't at the other sort of end of the spectrum. It isn't line management. We appreciate that, as in all professions, there will be some accountability and there's likely to be some line management, but that certainly is not what supervision is about. We're not here to check on your actions. Then the next one I think is mentoring, Jean.
Yes, I think mentoring very much I see as helping people think about their professional development, but I don't think mentoring usually would think about the personal and the broader impacts of your personal and professional system on that development. So it's a different kind of talking about yourself.
Okay, and then this is probably a more inclusive statement, I suppose. At the end of this is supervision is for everybody. It's not just for newly qualified people. So Jean and I are both quite senior in our professions, certainly in age, and we both have supervision. We've always had supervision, just once a month for an hour and a half, but very useful.
Yes, I think so. I think I've worked in social care and the NHS for over 20 years, and I don't think I would have survived without good supervision. I think particularly as I've become more senior, then the possibilities of having a space to really just think about dilemmas and relationships that are tripping me up in my work has been really important. And I see that in my colleagues across, for example, health and social care, that people are looking for supervision at quite a high level now, and recognizing that having a space to reflect on dilemmas and difficulties is an important space.
And I think we're kind of moving into the value added of systemic supervision for supervisees, but thinking about how helpful it is, when you're in a senior role, to be able to talk about the dilemmas of your organisation to somebody who is neutral and external to the organisation, and to free up that space in your head. I think that is right. I mean, certainly, I think both of us have had the privilege of doing that for people in quite senior positions across different different professions.
I mean, I guess I would go on to say, Catherine, that it's across the range of wherever you are in an organisation, having a space to reflect and think about the linkage of your personal and professional development. And in particular, if you're really feeling quite stuck by something, I think is really important. Because I think it is a safe space, as you said earlier, and it's a space for saying what may be unsayable in any other context. And that may be because there's something quite deeply personal about how the work is triggering something for you, is kind of really hitting some personal connection. Or it may be that the relationships you want to think about are those within your organization. And it's very difficult to talk within an organization sometimes to others who are also caught up in the same system, the same set of relationships.
Yeah, I mean, power and hierarchy are constructs, and you can't see them, but you certainly experience them when you work in organizations. One of the curious things is that it can become invisible to you as you become more senior in different ways. So clinically, you know, your competency grows through practice. So it may not be the position you hold in the organisation, or it might be that you are quite senior in terms of the structure of the organisation. And so for people who are maybe newly qualified or in a power dynamic relationship with you, although you might have perfectly good intent towards them, their lived experience of you can be quite challenging, or, you know, of me could be quite challenging. And having a space to reflect on that as possibly a newly qualified person, or someone who's struggling with a particular issue in terms of competency or work-life balance, can be very helpful in correcting your internal ideas about how everybody's seeing you, and just sort of shaping things down a little bit.
Because I suppose at the bottom, what we do is think about relationships in supervision, and their relationships with colleagues and with the families we see. And I think the challenge of relationships is that we're often, you know, either thinking about differences between ourselves and others, maybe professional differences, and maybe cultural differences, but also the samenesses between us. And, you know, you and I as older white women have quite a bit of sameness, quite a bit of difference as well that's maybe unseen. But sometimes the samenesses mean that we miss things. We assume certain things about ourselves or about our families and the clients we're working with. And I think attention to difference is really important.
Exactly. And I think that's a real quality of being a good supervisor. And I think something that I kind of hung up earlier is the idea of also, it is a space where you're deeply listened to, which I really don't think is a role of a line manager. You know, that they really have got, you know, a whole range of things that they need to do with you. And one of them, yes, they can listen to you, but, you know, they're not really there to deeply listen to you. Whereas the privilege of supervision is that you go along, and so my experience might be that I go along and talk about all the bits where I'm a bit stuck with clients, but also with people who I'm supervising. Yeah, it's a space for me to reflect and work out what I think and free up space in my head. But then there's this surprising, rather wonderful thing that happens when once someone gets to know you a little bit, they reflect back something to you, which is stuff you've actually said to them, and you suddenly see a whole load of things quite differently. And that's incredibly helpful.
And I think it's really helpful in de-stressing situations. And I think that understanding of sort of how to manage one's own stress is part of what happens in supervision. And I think the one thing that is very different than line management is that the agenda is set by the supervisee largely. People come with what they need to talk about. Okay.
And I think also it's very helpful thinking about professional standards, and you know, we all enter our professions, I hope, with some enthusiasm and sense of vocation and wanting to be ethical in our practice. And sometimes the world can throw at us some pretty grey situations, and actually having a space to talk that through before you then go out back to the real world to practice, and can really help you, for example, to think, right, this is something I need to talk about to my team.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to stop doing, or this is something I need to talk to my line manager about. You know, all those sorts of things. Once you've got your head around why it's been bugging you. So I think that's a genuinely useful aspect of supervision.
I think in addition,
So,
and
I think the other thing, Jean, I'd like.
Right.
Oh, go on.
I was thinking about the moving into kind of, I suppose, more into what issues we've talked to some level about the issues we focus on. But I guess one of the things that I guess we notice as supervisors, and often we think about with supervisees in supervision, is how the context of the work we're doing impacts on the kinds of difficulties sometimes we get in. So, for example, in a different context, you know, if you work with adolescents as part of your team, sometimes the team process can become quite adolescent. People get a bit challenging of authority. They get a bit silly. They can just get a bit stroppy sometimes. And I think in a context, for example, with family lawyers, where people are working a lot with conflict across divorce and separation, particularly, that when you're working with a lot of conflictual situations, sometimes conflict is something that comes into the organization, and you know, or high arousal of emotions can come into the organization, and helping people have a space to think about, where did that emotion come from? You know, is this really because I'm a bit bugged that somebody's just used the photocopier, or is it actually because I've just come out of a really difficult and very highly stressful situation?
Managing all that. So if we move to our last bit, which is really what is the bottom line of supervision, I guess we, you know, think that health and well-being is very important. Clearly, working as family lawyers, there is a high risk of burnout if you don't look after yourself, and you know, self-care is a significant part of that. And I do think supervision is a form of self-care. So that's one thing. For me, it's also ethically about doing a good job. It helps me. Now, at this stage, I'm confident saying that. But I think also, I really look forward to it.
It's very much a space that is your space, I think, really. And I think
absolutely.
It's important to think about ourselves. It's a bit of a truism, isn't it, to look after ourselves in order to look after others and to work with others. It's really important. I think probably this has given everyone a bit of a taster of supervision and what supervision is and isn't. Obviously, if you wanted to know more, you can contact Catherine or myself, or talk with the FLIP Family Law in Partnership colleagues and look at their website. Thank you.
Very well.